All right, this review is kind of a bit of a delay because it's been about a week since I've seen this film. So there's going to be probably some things I'm not going to remember half the time when I'm going this review, so I do apologize. But anyway, these are my thoughts on Mockingjay Part 2. Now, a little backstory. I'm really into the Hunger Games films. I mean, I'm not really too familiar with the books. I haven't really read them that much. But I really do get into the films like they are. I'm not 100. I know this story that they use in all these films are pretty much person from a lower class society has to join up, has to go into this royal society, and they're thrown into this arena where they have to kill each other with these other people, which has been used countless times in other stories. And this movie really, the first Hunger Games, what I remember is that it took that idea, but actually did some really clever things with it. I admit I actually really enjoyed a lot of the Hunger Games movies, the first three actually, and I'm not really too big on the actual, I'm not really too familiar with the books. Keep in mind, so there's going to be some things I'm gonna bring up later in the review that are not that are either from the book or not from the book. So correct me if I'm wrong in that in the comments. But anyway, I really enjoyed the first Hunger Games. I thought it was a good satire on reality television. It had some good moments with Katniss, played by Jennifer Lawrence. I thought that film really showed that Jennifer Lawrence can be a great actress, and it really showed that this woman can go through a lot of dilemmas throughout this entire series, and it really proved to me a lot about that. But anyway, overall, the stories pretty much are Katniss is this girl who's in this living in this lower society with her mother and her sister, and of course we know by now these movies have made so much of a franchise that it's really kind of pointless to even talk about the other movies. But I liked the first one. I thought it was the only problems I had with the first one was that a lot of the shaky cam was unnecessary. It was really hard to see out at times. Second one did that better, and they had the action scenes going on that were pretty good. And it was actually had a really better story too. Things got really dark, and you really getting into the characters a lot deeper. Especially Katniss's friend Peta, played by Josh Hutchinson. So I really enjoyed their chemistry together in those in the other two movies, and I went into Mockingjay Part One not really expecting a whole lot because I figured that they're going to be doing the approach like Harry Potter where they split the last book into two movies, which by now this is no surprise because it seems like every time we get a movie based on a book, they always put their last movie into two parts, which is it seems at this point it's really getting annoying. I mean, I know they're trying to make money off of it and everything, but they really just it's like they're taking fresh ideas from the book and they're cramming so much in the film that's not even from the book at all. But but I digress. Anyway, with Mockingjay Part Two, sorry, I want to go back to Part One real quick. For Part One, I did a review last year about it, and I felt like that film was good, but I did have a lot of problems with the pacing. And so going into this film, I really was expecting, to have them fix some of the problems or from the first part, kind of like how they did with Harry Potter, Devil Ellis Part 2, where the last part is going to be just flat out action. We're going to get deep really into the story, all bets are off, all that shit. Well, this one was probably kind of a disappointment. I didn't hate this film, keep in mind, but I thought it was very underwhelming, because pretty much the story, if you I'm not going to spoil anything, but if you've seen the first film, this second film picks up right where the first one leaves off, where Katniss is coming across Peeta, who was taken by the Capitol, and they do something really weird to his mind, and he goes berserk. So throughout this entire film, you really see a lot of the anger and rage that he goes through throughout this entire film, trying to kill everybody. So they do sedate him and all that, and so as the film progresses, you're really starting to see kind of a war movie. Like you see the characters going into the preparing to go into the Capitol, and so they're planning out their attacks and everything. And so I was actually for the first hour, I was actually really getting into it, because I thought it was really cool how they were setting things up with getting into the Capitol. But as the film went on, I was just really kind of bored in some parts because they have dialogue scenes where it goes on for so long that it really just seems like filler. Like they're talking, you have scenes where Katniss is talking to other characters from the previous films, and they just talk about scenes that happened from the earlier films in they don't really elaborate much on it until and let apart from a couple scenes in the movie that come in later. But yeah, this one I felt like it was very tedious at times with its pacing because it goes by. They try to really take a lot of liberties from the books a lot because the first half I thought they were kind of like doing their own thing, da 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 da, and going into just doing their own movie. But when you get to the second half of the film, it feels like they're trying to pretty much cram so much from the book, and then they're trying to add things that aren't even from the book at all. It can be very. First of all, that is just it's very tedious when you're trying to do so much into splitting a movie into two parts because you kind of lose focus of what you're doing with the main story. But also, I really found that some of the characters they have in the film, they really do have some good payoffs. But at the same time, when it gets as the film goes on, you really start to kind of lose a lot of focus on these characters because they really don't really elaborate much on them because they spend a lot less time with them as the movie progresses. I won't spoil who, but you get what I'm saying. But anyway, the things I did like about the film though is I love the surprises that we had with some of the action sequences because there are some set pieces in this film that I really didn't see coming at all that they really put that are very creative and very intense when shit goes down, when they're actually raiding the Capitol and all that. So when Katniss and all of them are going after President Snow, you really start to see that the movie kind of dwells on the fact that Katniss is going to finally end everything for good and everything, but not going to spoil anything. But when it gets to the very end, you do start to see something that you're kind of wondering, like, wow, this entire time they wanted to do this and they never. It's like the character. It's like she never realized this until now. But I will say I didn't. That was a good twist, but the final act was very anticlimactic. I guess I was just expecting too much with the final climax because they seemed like they were doing they spent a lot of their time leading up to the event, but instead of actually taking time for when the actual shit goes down. And but I will say this though is that with the kid, it is well acted. Jennifer Lawrence does very wonderful as well, like she always does. She captures the intensity as Katniss. I'm not sure how close she is in the book at this point. You'll have to tell me about it in the comments. But I thought she did fine. I even like Josh Hutcherson. The rest of the cast, they all do perfectly fine. I just feel like the movie really delves too much somberness to the characters, and you really feel like they're very over dramatic in a lot of parts. Which, at this point, I mean, the previous Hunger Games, at least you had some comedy going on. Even when shit was going serious, you still had some comedy relief, so to speak. This one, they don't really do it too much in this one. Like, it's very depressing, to say the least. But yeah, I would say though that the ending was good. I'm glad they wrapped everything up and all that, but they don't really. They could have had a better payoff than what they did in this one. And I'm not going to go into spoilers or anything like that. I'm going to try to make this kind of a little bit less detailed in this review, but I will say that the film was just okay. It's nothing too special. It's a great impact to the story and how they resolve everything in the very end, but it left a bad impression on it left a bad aftermath after I seen it. I just walked there, I was like, man, that could have been so much better, but they didn't do much with it, you know. So I will say that as far as one of the better franchises that end, I haven't seen Breaking Dawn, but this is a lot better than that on how that movie ended. So there's that going for it. And plus, the music was very good too. You have your classic orchestral score playing and all that, and the action scenes are a lot tighter than they were in the previous one because the previous part one they had a lot of scenes where they were doing the shaky cam thing again like they did in the first film, which I thought they were going to get rid of that. They did. And I mean, there's much more I can go on to, but again, I don't want to rule anything out for people who haven't seen the film. So if you are wanting to check it out, I'd say check it out. Probably rent it at least on Redbox or watch it on Netflix at least, because they do have some things that work, like the characters' motivations and what they do, and you get they do wrap everything nicely with some of the characters. But I also did have a problem too. not I know I'm going wrong place, but I did still have a problem with how they were doing the whole weird love story angle with Katniss and Peeta and Gale. Because, well, first of all, I really don't like Liam Hemsworth, so he was one of the worst parts of this film. And they, I'm glad they kind of do something. I'm not going to rule out what happens, but they do something in the very end where you're just like, all right, well, that worked. I get that worked. So that was good. But yeah, it's a very mediocre film at best. I hate to say it, but I mean, if I'm going by the story part, I guess I was more into part one that was a part two. But for the action, I'll give part two over part one a lot better. So overall, I guess I'm going to give this film probably a 5 out of 10. Yeah, I'll be fair. There are a lot of pacing issues. I thought it was very boring at times, but at the same time, there were parts of the story I got into and good action scenes and well acted performances, but could have been a lot better. So that's really all I've got, and I'm glad they ended the franchise for good because now I keep hearing they're going to be doing spin-offs, which I guess that's necessary because there's going to be other movies that are going to be doing that too. So that's really all I have for Mockingjay. And for those of you who have read the books, let me know in the comments what you thought about it, and see how there are things that. Let me know if there was anything from the movie that was from the book that they did, and kind of do some comparisons because I do want to know some details about it. But anyway, that's my final thoughts. If you like the film, that's fine. I thought it was just okay, and I'll be doing another review here soon coming up, and I hope everyone has a good rest of your night, and I shall see you guys later.